Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to the 2024 astrology panel and all of the cosmic juice that is my just like absolute joy to bring you all. Of course, I would never not be doing a panel without my very, very dear friend Katie. So welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me again, love. It's always a pleasure being part of these panels. I so look forward to them every year, and there's so much juicy stuff to talk about as usual. So thank you, thank you.
There is so much, so much. We've already been talking for 40 minutes before we recorded this. So we're all lubed up and warm.
As always.
As always. Talking about astrology, talking about politics, talking about the world and how fucking crazy it is. So, that's the Mine and Katie podcast, is that's what we talk about.
Exactly.
So I am super pumped. Katie has picked a wonderful topic that I actually have a little paragraph in my 2024 kit as well, because it was a topic that, of course, is a signature transit of next year. And as soon as she said she wants to talk about it, and she's already picked her 2025 topic too, which I have A-okayed with a big tick. Very exciting. This is just a very, very awesome transit that's happening. It's rare, it's exciting, and I can't wait for Katie to unpack it all for us. But as we all know, I have to ask the question first. And I'm drinking kombucha, so it's probably not the best thing to be drinking as I'm hosting a panel. Not great. Usually it's tea, but it's kombucha tonight. So the question I've been asking all of my astrologer guests are, what is an aspect that you personally have gone through in 2023, and how has knowing the astrology helped you navigate that? Because, of course, this whole panel is based on awareness as a superpower. Astrology is a secret, not so secret superpower. And when we are prepped and planned, and lubed up, we can navigate the transit better. And so I've loved all of the responses so far. I can't wait to hear yours. And, once we understand what your transit is, and then, like hearing that if you didn't know that, for some people, they've said it would be a mental health issue if I hadn't have known that. But because I knew it, I was able to move through that without, really spiraling into a depression. So it's been quite a big question, and quite, it's a very sensitive question too. But knowing the astrology for me is very empowering, obviously, because we're both astrologers and we're very similar like that. So tell us your big transit. You're one of, I'm sure, many of 2023 that you want to share with us, darling.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tiani. I think it's such a great question. And I'm also now looking forward to going and hearing all the other interviews and seeing what other astrologers have had going on for themselves. For me, it's been Saturn stuff, which I found interesting that you were like, if I didn't know about this, like maybe I would have spiraled into kind of a depression. And I can be real and say, like, life has not been easy. I've had a lot of Saturn stuff the last couple of years because Saturn was moving through my 12th house, something we all go through, of course, every 30 years, but it's not an easy house to have Saturn, especially if we don't know about it. But Saturn this year finally broke free of those 12th house shackles and crossed my ascendant in March and April of 2023. And my midheaven is almost exactly by degree square my ascendant. Now, that's not always common, right? They don't travel together. So my midheaven is 2 Sag, my ascendant is 4 Pisces. And so I've had this concurrent Saturn conjunct my ascendant once in a 30-year transit, whilst it's also been squaring my midheaven. And I have a very full 10th house, lots of Sag placements. My natal Saturn actually is 29 degrees Sag, conjunct my Uranus. So when Saturn stuff comes around for me, it can be, of course, all the quintessential Saturn things. But with Saturn in my 10th, I remember reading, and I feel terrible that I can't quote the astrologer right now, but a brilliant astrologer said once that, people with Saturn in the 10th house are sort of like Saturn's children. And that doesn't mean that Saturn is always, working for you, but if you do the Saturn work, the rewards do come through. And I do want to say that as hard as this year has been for me because of that square, that tension, that feeling of like, okay, I'm sort of being pushed through a tunnel at the moment, a lot of 10th house stuff, first house stuff. But by staying kind of committed and true and dedicated, to the choices I've made, the goals I've been working towards, that steady kind of development, I have had sort of concurrently beautiful experiences as well. So, being an astrologer, I'm so glad to know about this because it makes those hard moments more palatable, I suppose we could say, right? Doesn't mean that my life is easy or straightforward, but I do love Saturn. Saturn isn't a planet, I have a day chart, right? So Saturn is supporting and working for me. And so it has been fascinating though, seeing kind of the growth and the changes in my work and a different kind of path that is coming in for me as an astrologer, and moving more into retreats, which is something I've wanted to do for years. And seeing that actually come through as that Saturnian reward now, even though it's through a square, it's been tense, but I love a good square, because it means what? Growth, and it means evolution. And so I think that that's what 2023 has been for me. Thank you for that question, Tiani. It's actually been nice to kind of be like, what has 2023 been for me? So thank you.
No, great. And being stripped, Saturn rules the bones, the bone mother. And in Pisces on the ascendant, this transit is a rite of passage that everyone gets at a different age. Someone might have it at 3 and then at 33, someone might have it for the first time at 16 and then at 46, it's different ages because of our own rites of passage with our own birth charts. And so to have this happening now, really setting you up for this next 30-year cycle, pretty much, it does have to come in and strip you bare to the bones as it hits your ascendant to rebuild. And then Saturn moves through that first house, and the rebuilding, it's the new scaffolding, as much as Saturn in the first and then the reflection of Saturn in the fourth around the foundation and the new scaffolding. It is rewarding. I mean, I love Saturn. He's my homeboy. So I love
we
him.
have a different perspective sometimes on Saturn, but I love what you said about the bones, because of course, Saturn has that correlation with the body and the bones. And even just to share, like I've had a lot of joint issues this past year. It started with Saturn in my 12th, conjunct my sun opposite my moon. That was the but yeah, I've definitely had stuff coming up with my skeletal system, and a lot of pain and a lot of issues that I've been moving through with my health. Even my wisdom teeth have just been deciding to erupt and go off, right? Which is always a pleasure. So it's fascinating to also be able to see, like, oh, of course, by my own personal cosmic clock, my wisdom teeth are coming through when Saturn's crossing my ascendant, right?
And the ascendant, the ascendant shows a lot of health too, a lot of health stuff,
really
a lot of health stuff.
The body, right? The second house is the body too, but it's more about the tactile relationship with the body. The first house is that framework of the body. So there's definitely been a lot of that stuff. So yeah, brilliant question, Tiani. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. It's a big transit, a very big transit. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm so excited. Let's kick this off. Chiron is my homeboy, as well as Saturn, as well as Pluto and Lilith and Algol. But it's too hard as an astrologer to play favorites. I have a Chiron Cazimi. So, having a Chiron Cazimi means that essentially I am Chiron. Like it is. And so this Chiron North Node conjunction next year actually is nearly exactly semi-sextile my sun Chiron. So it's very interesting. It's a very unusual, because a semi-sextile is your neighbor. I'm a Taurus, it's in Aries. And so it can be a little bit uncomfortable. It's not familiar. Taurus and Aries couldn't nearly be polar opposites on some level. One's fast and wants to win and competitive, and a Taurus just doesn't give a fuck. That's just what it comes down to. I just say to people, I'm not competing with you. You win. The end. Don't care. So very, very different to fire signs and all that sort of stuff. I've got barely any fire in my chart. I just don't give a shit about that stuff. But so I'm very fascinated by hearing all of the downloads that you have for this, and I'm fucking super pumped about this conjunction. There's some big stuff, and let's do it. Let's just fucking get into it. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tiani, for sharing. And I was looking forward to having this conversation with you too, knowing how deeply you travel with Chiron yourself, with that Cazimi in your natal chart. I also have Chiron exactly square my nodes, exactly sextile my Jupiter. So I feel like Chiron is a big sort of ever-present energy for me, right? Despite whatever else is going on, it's always kind of somehow tying back to Chiron in capacity in my chart. So I was really excited to have the opportunity to talk about this conjunction for all of you today, because it's not a common conjunction. The last time that the North Node and Chiron were conjunct was back in around 2008-ish period. It was in 19 degrees Aquarius. So now we're having it again since 2008 in 2024, of course. And then the next time that they will come around and meet again won't be until 2038 in Cancer. And then they won't meet again till 2063 in Pisces. So it's sort of something that is, it's a transit that, especially as a sort of a budding astrologer, and when we're learning, we may not quite catch it because, it's sort of, given the nature of course, retrogrades and so forth, this transit can kind of last for a few months, if there is a retrograde happening over that degree. But it's not as long term as something like, Pluto coming over and forming a conjunction with a planet. They can sort of sit together for about a 2-year period. So this North Node in Aries conjunction, it's weird to say, but I feel like it's kind of subtle. Now, it's not in a subtle sign. It's not going to show up in a subtle way, especially because we're having eclipse over these points as well. So we're not in subtle times, but just the sort of nature of this conjunction, it's just important to sort of note for those of you, especially who are wanting to study astrology, is to start to train your astrologer's eye to look for some of these easily missed transits, because like we're in 2024 almost, and then this isn't going to happen again for like 15 or 16 years, so it's easy to forget about it again, right? We're not going to really think like, oh yeah, Chiron, the North Node. But as someone with Chiron square my own North Node, like I said, it is ever present. So this exact conjunction is going to happen in February and March of 2024. So it's quite an early introduction to the year that we're having this connection. And it's going to be happening at 16 degrees and into 17 degrees of the sign. So I'm going to share my screen with you all, as I'd like you to sort of see what I'm talking about. So just give me a moment while I arrange that. Perfect. So as you can see, we have this conjunction here. So we've got Chiron here at 16, the North Node at 16. And I've drawn this chart up to be on the 19th of February, 2024. Now, this is based on the node being the true node. Now, we can also work with the mean node, which is something Tiani and I were at first kind of figuring out, because she works with the mean node, I work with the true node. It's only ever a subtle difference, but the node, this conjunction will happen on the 5th of March, 2024. So about 2-ish weeks later, at 17 degrees. Okay, so there's this kind of like window of this conjunction coming into play. Now, astrologically, what is Chiron? Who is Chiron? Chiron is the maverick. Chiron is the wounded healer. Chiron is often an inherited wound that we have, and the house placement is going to tell you, of course, a lot more personally what this means for you, because Chiron is a generational placement, and Chiron has an erratic orbit similar to Pluto, in the sense that Chiron does not spend the same amount of time in each sign. So Chiron is in Aries for a huge period for Chiron, right? It spends about 9 years in Aries, whilst it spends the least amount of time, only about 18 months or so, in its opposite sign of Libra. So it spends also 8 years in Pisces, 9 years in Aries. So when it's moving through this part of the chart, it's a slow burn. Okay. And when it's in the opposite space, it's whizzing by. So this is why you can maybe have, a sibling or a friend that's actually quite close in age to you, if you have your Chiron over here in, like from say Cancer, Leo, Virgo onwards. And you can be close in age, but have very different Chiron signs. And that's because Chiron really picks up speed as he's moving through this other side of the chart. So it's important to note that, because this is a long unfolding Chiron journey that we are moving through of healing. Okay, so of course you may have Chiron in Aries in your own chart. If you're in your sort of late 40s and early 50s, you could be going through your Chiron return, of course, during this period. But for most of us by transit, this is just showing up for us in our own Aries house. So Chiron, like I said, is about uncovering our wounds, and being in Aries, it's around our identity, right? It's also about coming in with the North Node. What I really want to sort of share and really sort of put to all of you is it's such a powerful opportunity to break through like generational curses, cycles, open new pathways to you around your healing cycle and journey, especially because we have a 9-year period to do this. So through conversations with my own students, it's been really interesting over the last few years, because I think sometimes, given the slow moving nature of Chiron in Aries, it can be a little bit hard to grasp how it actually shows up, right? Because it's not kind of overly apparent. But Aries, it's about the identity, it's also about the ego, it's about the self. And so we have a lot of wounded people around at the moment, right? That's normal. Like, your stuff is going to be coming up. Now, what that stuff may be, what that path may be, those experiences, those patterns are going to be personally relevant to you based on what your Aries house is. So know your chart. Like, it's great to come to these panels to study astrology, to be like, Chiron in Aries means this. Great. What does it mean for you, right? How is it actually showing up for you? Because that is going to give you so much more information than just thinking of like Chiron in Aries as what I feel is the spiritual warrior. This is the wounded healer becoming not a warrior to, put down and conquer, but to lift up and support, and actually really come into creating, I hate to say it like this, but like, the new earth, because I'm not one of those new earthers, okay? But in really kind of, how can we support the self, right, with the North Node in Aries versus the South Node of like, how are we working and connecting in partnership and as a collaboration and as a team together? These are the bigger themes. So with the North Node coming along and moving into this axis of Aries and Libra for this 18-month period, we are working on this axis, or this balance point of, like, of course, self versus others. And so there are a lot of themes coming up around relationships, also, making choices, that better serve oneself, of course, without being selfish in the process. And with the North Node being, of course, our direction. Where are we heading? Where is the collective moving to? Where am I being drawn into? Like, what are the scents that I need to kind of follow along this path? Coming into this conjunction with Chiron, as I said, offers this incredibly potent and powerful moment to really embody and let go of a lot of tension that is present in your Libra house. So it's a really I wrote here that it's this evolutionary shift, an opportunity to rewrite destiny and to create, or co-create, I should say, our fate. Okay. And so we can see that in 2008, of course, if you were to sort of journey through your own chart, well, your Aquarius house would have been activated and stimulated by this conjunction. This time around, it's the Aries house. So you may find that, yeah, identity issues are coming up right now. Ego wounds are rising to the surface. A lot of tension is going to be present. We also can't ignore that this conjunction is happening quite close to Eris, the planet, of war and disruption. And I don't want to go too much into that today, because I really want to kind of keep this on the straight and narrow, but I do think it is important to mention that. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of identity stuff coming up. And I actually think that this is really important for other, collective conversations that are coming up really big time at the moment, such as trans activism and things like this. I really hope that this sort of sets off or lights up a path, can be, of course, more acceptance and integration and love and connection and support around these communities that are so woven into their identity and wanting to be able to freely embody who they are, and how they choose to live their life and their own experiences. So these things are also kind of collectively coming into play here as well. But Tiani, is there anything that you kind of wanted to add to this so far? Because I always love to keep it conversational with you. I try not to just speak down the camera at everybody.
We still love that, darling. We still love that.
Thank you.
Yes, and so absolutely, as usual, agree with everything, and just wanting to sort of, some of the notes that I took to with the Chiron and the North Node was embracing and accepting your wholeness, and I've been working a lot with acceptance lately, and I've been doing a lot of diving into Jungian psychology and mythology. And, you know, even Jung himself talks about it's not about a state of perfectionism, it's about a state of wholeness. And this really is around the integration of darkness and the integration of shadows. And we must look at if Chiron is hitting the North Node, it's opposing the South Node. And so some of the things that I've sort of felt into here was the collective pain, self-pity, people feeling stuck in pain, stuck in their wounds, stuck in their suffering. And this invitation is to heal the pain, to lean into it, to you know, to rise above that. But at the same time, that's still going to be present. We can't have Chiron and the North Node. And there is this sense of exhilaration because I feel that embracing of the whole. And that's why I've just said that sentence. And then I've gone straight into the South Node, because I think that there's this delusion that we've got to cut the shadow, or we can't have the shadow. And the shadow is the South Node. We're working with the dragon's tail here, who's collected all of this wisdom. And with Chiron opposing that South Node, whilst he, yes, activates and invites and ushers in the North Node quests of purpose and like just radical self-acceptance. Absolutely. I mean, this is the journey. But that South Node stuff, that's what we may see collectively, especially once we start talking about the last time this happened and we're looking at war, you know, like the last time these two come together in 2008 was a lot of war, Mumbai bombings, like it was a lot. So those sort of things, I just want everyone to remember as well, like staying stuck in self-pity, in the victim, especially with a Libra South Node, it's, you know, that is not going to be conducive to growth. And these are the sort of transits, but like Katie said, they are ones that get missed, you know, like, and so of course you know, everything everyone's talking about here, I've already put in my kit because these mean something to me. These are the things that I don't miss. But Katie and I both have eyes for this sort of shit. We're always talking about these aspects that, you know, not many astrologers are talking about. I mean, yes, you know, people will start to talk about it, but this is quite monumental. And, you know, that invitation to move away from that self-pity, and where are you stuck in suffering? Where are you stuck in that loop? Where are you stuck in the wound? You know, that is a lot of this sort of you know, the invitation with this conjunction as well. And that's, you know, I'm just sort of, you know, I'm totally in this Jungian stuff at the moment too. So it's just quite prevalent for me to be talking about the wholeness and the integration, and knowing that once we merge with the shadow, we can become whole, because it's not about cutting it off. Just like we don't cut the dragon's tail off. We're not trying to cut the South Node out of our life. We're trying to integrate and ride the dragon to the North Node, to the Dharma.
Yep. Beautiful, Tiani. Like, thank you so much for sharing all of that, because especially like with that cutting off of the South Node, you know, one thing that really sometimes frustrates me about, you know, when you are learning astrology and trying to explore like what are the nodes, is that oftentimes the South Node is just automatically seen as like what you shouldn't be doing, what's bad and what's wrong. And yes, it is about a release. It's about being more conscious of like, okay, what's working in, using this example, of course, what's working in my Libra house? What planets do I have in cardinal signs that may be getting activated and having squares, conjunctions, oppositions? You know, like what is kind of shifting for me here? And perhaps, yes, what needs to be released. But the South Node also embodies mastery. It's just about having the confidence or the curiosity to sort of explore and expand into, you know, the dragon's head, as Tiani said, with the North Node in Aries, moving into unfamiliar territory. And so with the North Node conjuncting Chiron in Aries, you are heading into unfamiliar territory in your Aries house at this time. Something is being brought to light. So it's important to remember that the opposing house, the opposing axis with this South Node in Libra, actually holds a lot of wisdom, a lot of gifts for you. But if you are still sort of following the monotony of that path and trying to do things the old way around Libra themes, your Libra house, well, that's where you're going to come unstuck, right? You're going to have frustrations, things are going to collapse around you, because we throw in the eclipses, right? And so that's when we have these monumental moments, especially if we have cardinal planets at this time, of things being, you know, things entering and exiting out of our lives as if oh my God, how the hell did that happen? Well, how it happened is go to your nodes, go to your houses, start to unpack this cardinal axis, and you will see, that there was a story starting to, play into this before that moment occurred. And this is why I love astrology. And I love the question Tiani asked at the beginning of this, because astrology is such a brilliant tool, not for like making predictions and all that bullshit, because what does that do? That just feeds the ego. Oh, I said this was going to happen on that time. Great. Did that change the world? No. Like, we don't want to be working with astrology solely for that purpose or reason, right? Using it as a pathway for self-development, for evolution, for understanding your patterns. And then when you understand them and have awareness, right? And then you can start to move into this path of wholeness, as Tiani said. And that's not something that just happens overnight. That is a lifetime's process, right? And this is what Chiron speaks of as well. I don't believe that there is ever a finish line with placements like the outer planets, but Chiron, the nodes, there's never a point that you get to on your journey of working with these energies of being like, oh, I've got it all figured out. Tick that box. I'm enlightened. I'm healed, right? It's just a moment of integration, of coming into that wholeness of self and being able to recognize that and go, okay, I've added something new to my toolkit. Does this change who I am at my core? Of course not. Is there a potential that other transits, triggers, people, events are going to take me back into that South Node, all those patterns and tendencies? Of course. That's the human experience, right? There's never this space of perfection. And that's where we start to go off center and off kilter. And this takes me into the next part of what I wanted to speak about with this chart, because I love to work with a few asteroids. Asteroids aren't something that every astrologer is into, and that's fine. It opens up always that discussion of, some astrologers work with different systems and planets and placements and so forth. But I do love to always take a peek at what, the goddess asteroids are doing at any given time. And I was quite blown away, because we can see that on this date that I've drawn up, this 19th of February, 2024, we can see that Juno and Lilith, but specifically Juno first, is almost exactly by only, 6 or 7 minutes in conjunct or quincunx with this conjunction here, with this Aries, North Node, and Chiron. We follow this kind of like dotted line in this system, and we go, oh, Juno, the asteroid of love, relationships, connection, partnership. These themes sound familiar, don't they? Because this is a lot of what we speak of with Libra and that South Node. And so many of us astrologers have been saying, with the nodes moving across this axis at this time, relationship themes and stuff is coming up. Now, we don't have to fear that, right? It doesn't mean, oh my God, the South Node's in Libra. If I'm in a relationship, it's automatically going to end. Although I do have to say that with the South Node moving into Libra, whilst we had this 2023 Venus retrograde in Leo, you only have to look, not that I'm like a celebrity follower or anything, but like a hell of a lot of public relationships came to an end. So of course that is a potential. But again, knowing your own chart, knowing where your Libra house is, that's going to show you much more about the themes that are coming up that are making and breaking relationships and connections, and also your own sense of identity in your own chart and life. So with this theme of perfectionism, it opens me up into this Juno and Lilith space, because of course, if we think of Virgo, the first word that we often think of is perfectionism with this energy, right? Like, Virgo energy is very methodical, practical, logical. It is mutable energy though, so they are a little bit more kind of flexible than maybe we immediately think. They are ruled by Mercury. So we have Juno, the asteroid of planets, the asteroid of partnerships, coming through this space. And yes, it can be just adding to this story at this time of some challenge, some hardship, some space for growth in the realm of relationships. And what I feel is going to come up is probably a tendency to be conscious of within yourself of nitpicking, fault finding, perfectionism, but from a space of where it can do, damage or hold us back, right? Like, because perfectionism is also important. Like, it's important to strive towards, all of the earth signs have this energy, right? There's a sense of striving towards goal setting and having ambition, something to work towards and focus on. So in relationships, this is really right? We want to make sure we're on the same page as our partner, but that does not mean we are the same person as our partner. And so even though we're, on this same journey together, and this can, of course, I just want to say to extend into any type of relationship, right? I don't want to get too stuck in the realm of that this has to just be romantic relationships. But of course, with any connection that we have, we're sort of hoping to head to that same space. But if we are getting too lost in like, well, my way, I have this toolkit, or it has to be, this way, and we get really sort of hung up on like the time or the path or the way that we approach this is where tension can show up, because we are different people and we have different approaches. And so compromise is immensely important with this sort of overarching 18-month cycle that we are moving through. Now, just to also catch some of you who may be also sort of learning and just starting your journey with astrology, I just want to explain what an in conjunction is, or a quincunx, because it's not a very common aspect. It's considered a minor aspect, but to me, it is not a minor aspect. I think it should actually be included with the main aspects that we often talk about, like oppositions, squares, etc. You can see here that we have Virgo 16 and Aries 16. So this is forming a 150-degree angle. So see how it's kind of like, I always describe it to my students as being like a weird, there's just something's off kilter with this energy. Something just feels a bit not as, uncomfortable or tight as a square or frustrating, but just something feels amiss. And this is because we have Aries that is fire and cardinal, and we have Virgo in this example as being earth and mutable. So what happens here is that by mode and by element, there's no resonance, there's no connection, right? Because if we're talking about squares and oppositions, squares, of course, are the same modality but different elements, which is the tension. But oppositions are the same modality and complementary elements. So this is why I think this 150-degree quincunx is so important, because it is bringing in two energies that really struggle energetically to find that commonality and that middle ground. And I think that this is really contributing to a lot of the tension that is going to be present, especially on a global scale, through geopolitics and all of this kind of stuff over the coming kind of, frankly, like 2 to 3 years at least, this sort of real midpoint of the decade that we're moving into. And then, of course, Lilith is here too. And, with Lilith in this space, this is sort of what I was touching on with like the nitpicking, the fault finding, because Lilith in Leo, definitely the shadow can be criticism, right? This is a thing that Lilith in Leo, well, look, I have Lilith in my 6th house, so different sign, but definitely an energy of Lilith that I'm familiar with and catching myself with in terms of that untamed raw power. But sometimes I can thwart myself through getting too lost in the details. And, with this, Tiani, I wanted to ask you just around Lilith, because you've been speaking so much on her in 2023 and some incredible sort of channelings that you've brought through on this. But is there anything that you would maybe like to add just on these asteroids or Lilith in particular with this in conjunction?
Well, like, it's such a great topic. I love a quincunx. I'm all for quincunxes with a yod in my own chart. And also, just when you were saying Lilith, then you were saying Lilith in Leo, but she does mean Lilith in Virgo, just to clear that up.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, it's fine. I knew, we all knew what you meant, but I was just like, just for those people going, oh, but it's no, so it's in Virgo. But I also just wanted to touch on the Juno, because of course Juno is then exactly semi-sextile the South Node. And I've already looked at the Juno South Node conjunction that's going to happen, because this is I'm actually going to be holding a very big container around this, or a masterclass, because this is huge around sacred vows. And Juno is someone I've been working very strongly with. She is conjunct my Pluto in my 1st house in Libra. So I have a very strong relationship with Juno. And so interestingly enough, this quincunx, when we have this activation of Chiron, the North Node, and then the quincunx to Juno, and everything that Katie said was so great around that, nitpicking and, again, these just, we're looking at these uncomfortable adjustments to what you were devoted to, is what I wrote, because Juno is so loyal. She was loyal to Zeus, who slept with all the people, right? Like, but she is the queen of heaven, and she is a very powerful, powerful asteroid. And the devotion and the loyalty that she has with this quincunx to Chiron and the North Node, and then also that semi-sextile, which again is another uncomfortable position, very similar to the quincunx, because again, Virgo has nothing in common with cardinal air because it is the mutable Earth. So, you know, it was a great to share. That's what a quincunx is. It's uncomfortable. It's something that we have to make an adjustment on. And that's usually the word, uncomfortable adjustment. I always go askew, like something feels askew, and you were using those words as well. And I was like, yeah, they're the words we use with a quincunx. And so, you know, I just was, you know, my thing is with this is like the prequel to Juno hitting the South Node. because I've already done a big masterclass on the nodes. The South Node gets a lot more hits than the North Node. And the fact that Juno rides with the South Node for a little while. And, you know, a question that I wrote here is when people, again, this is around relationships and the loyalty and what you are actually devoted to, whether it's, you know, is it the self, Aries? Is that what you're devoted to? Or are you devoted to a marriage? Like, there's going to be these uncomfortable questions that may be posed by situations that are happening outside of you, because what happens when the world goes crazy and you're squeezed? Well, how many marriages have broke up since 2020? 20 plus year marriages. Well, that's because there was no foundation, or they had been long over for 10 plus years. And my question always is when someone's fearing their relationship ending, that's saying something about your relationship, you know, because astrology isn't anything to fear. Like, I wouldn't think once that having Juno in the South Node, or, you know, all this, you know, Chiron conjunction and Chiron opposition, or even the South Node being in Libra, like, it didn't once come to ever even enter my field that it's about me and my husband, because that's just, you know, I think that you've got to question if relationship stuff is being told by an astrologer and your first reaction is that, I think you need to turn that mirror onto yourself and figure this out. Like, why are you immediately thinking that? What's not right? And so this, to me, this quincunx is the lube. It's going to be uncomfortable, and then when Juno actually hits the South Node, there it is. That is where the work will be. And it's I'm very excited about my masterclass, or whatever I'm going to put together around this next year. I've been frothing it. I've written about it in my 2024 kit, of course. And, you know, this is to me a very strong signature. And to have Lilith there as well is also activating, you know, with Eris is there, Lilith is there. We both, didn't we say before we jumped on, pick your battles. You know, this is around picking your battles. And what are you going to choose to do? Because Lilith is primal power. And again, you know, in Virgo, she has this level of art, you know, is that devotional service serving you? You know, again, are you a martyr? Are you playing victim? Which already we've seen with Chiron opposite the South Node. So I really feel, you know, I just want to say, watch the wallowing, you know, like, watch the wallowing. It feels like Chiron in fucking Pisces all over again. God help that 9
right.
years. What a nightmare that fucking was. Oh, awful. So, you know, Chiron in Aries, I was frothing for about 3 years. I'm like, hurry up already, you know. And it's very interesting to me that Chiron spends the most time in Pisces and Aries. So the last sign of the zodiac and the first sign. The last sign, and look, I'm talking shadow stuff here. The last sign, very much martyr, victim, poor me. You know, it's very heavy. It's very sensitive. Then the first sign, it's like, me first, selfish, warrior, fuck this. Like, I'm making a move and I am healing. So now we're getting this Chiron conjunction. And really interestingly enough, the last time Chiron actually hit a node was the South Node in Pisces in March of 2016. So go back to there, because this Juno-Lilith quincunx in Virgo, opposite to Pisces, with a lot of, hello, look what's happening on the day. 0 degrees Pisces Sun, 8 degrees Saturn, trining the 8-degree moon, 26 degrees Pisces. Again, there's a big stellium in Pisces. And the last time Chiron hit a node was the South Node in Pisces. And like you said, in 2063, he will hit the North Node in Pisces. So really interesting Pisces sort of stuff, right? So it's really fascinating that, I just weave. I was talking about this in my podcast today, like my Pallas Athene in Gemini in my ninth house, the weaving that I do, it's just like, it's all just in my head. It's just like, I see every symbol and everything. And knowing, and you know, you pointing out this quincunx has been so perfect because I've been so focused on Juno conjunct the South Node, that this feels like that lube up. And to have Lilith there as well, again, this primal power of, but again, there's a softness. I love Lilith in Virgo. I think that we need it. It's a very healing balm to our ragged souls after the fucking fiery burn of Lilith and Leo. You know, we really need this balm. But then, you know, I feel the connection here that, again, this is a prequel. We're having Chiron and the North Node conjunct quincunx, Juno, and Lilith. Juno then goes on to hit the South Node, opposing the North Node. It won't come and hit the North Node. Then Lilith goes on to hit the South Node in 2024 as well. So there's some really big purging stuff. And if we think about, yes, those things that I talked about, the suffering and, you know, the pain and healing your pain and facing your pain and leaning in, I think we will then get that wholeness and that acceptance and that integration and that alchemy, and remembering that we are our medicine, which I think that it's sort of like drinking our own elixir and drinking our own medicine, which to me really represents Chiron in Aries, that no one is you and that is your power. No one is you and that is your power. That for me is a statement for Chiron in Aries. So to have the node of Dharma hitting that, like, it's just, it's quite an exquisite. I love this transit though. I love it. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's really, it just feels like such a beautiful integration point, you know. And I think one thing to remember with Chiron too, you know, even just by its location, you know, it is the rainbow bridge between the known, Saturn, and the unknown of Uranus. So with the North Node coming onto Chiron, there is an opportunity for knowing, integration, not feeling that kind of push-pull between like Saturn boundaries and Uranus's need to like flip tables and tell people to go fuck themselves, right? Like, I have Saturn conjunct Uranus, okay? Like,
oh my God, what a conundrum that is.
Right at 29 Sag, what a joy.
Far out, babe. That is epic.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, and it's generational, right? Like 87 and 88 babies, like we all share this. And
yeah, but still, it's still a small amount of people that share that, because to have two outer planets like that conjunct, very rare, because then at some point they've moved and Saturn's moved on and Saturn's now in Cap, and you know, and then yes, we've got that Cap and we've got the Uranus and we've got the Neptune conjunction for later on. So there is, but that like your time is really quite amazing with those outer planets, those transpersonal planets all being big. But it's such a fucking paradox to have Saturn and Uranus conjunct. I mean, at the end of the day, they're both, you know, they rule Capricorn and Aquarius on some level too, you know, like there's something that sort of works but then doesn't work, right?
Exactly.
So you're fighting yourself in your 10th house. No, I must do these things. Fuck everything, you know? Like,
oh, it is a journey, right? And it's something I was actually teaching my students last night about the elements. And I was talking about how when we look at the elements and the modes in our natal chart, it can be quite surprising because sometimes we see a dominance in an element that often may not be our sun sign, right? Because we come into astrology normally as like, oh, I'm a this sign, I'm a that sign. And so we sort of have that connection. But for me, when I realized that my chart was full of fire, that changed my life, because I was not living a life at that age. Like I was in my late teens, early 20s. I don't feel that I really knew myself. I was discovering myself, right? But I was very stuck in like people pleasing and being very quiet and meek and always doing the right thing, right? Maybe that Saturn side of the conjunction with Uranus. And when I discovered all this fire that I had, it was like this sort of permission slip to be like, I can say what I feel. And you know what? Sometimes I might upset people and piss people off. But if I'm not coming from a space of unkindness or selfishness or, you know, being conscious of my ego, there can be powerful transformations in relationships by actually just fucking saying what you're thinking, right? So we have to express that. And I think that's what this Chiron-North Node is saying too. Have the hard conversations. Yes, it's scary thinking that that could bring an end to a connection, but it doesn't always have to be that way. It can bring an end to the pattern at that time in that connection. And if you two are still wanting that journey and being on the same page, you can transform and evolve together. So please don't come into this eclipse season of Aries and Libra fearing loss and endings as like the given for this space, because it's an opportunity to transform your connections. And I think that that's kind of like a good point to end that on. I think that statement, because I was being really conscious too of like, you know, that this is just a sort of short transit. We want to get to the heart of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that really is the heart of this conjunction on a personal level.
Yeah. I love it. I just wanted to give a couple of other little dates before we wrap up. So, you know, as Katie talked about, she's working with the True Node, and here in Australia, the 5th of March at 17 degrees will be the exact conjunction. So we can see that that's a couple of weeks after the 19th. But what I've sort of like, you know, from where Katie has now, because the nodes are, you know, a true node like true Lilith is constantly moving. So the mean node is exactly that, just finding its space, right? So ultimately, I've sort of put this, you know, the 19th of Feb, now that I've been, you know, brought up to speed with the true node, right through until around the 14th of March. So it is, you know, like it is a nice, you know, a good solid month that we're in this. And just sort of, I also just wanted to bring the attention again, this is a mean node thing, to the 12th of March, because the 12th of March, the moon is also at 17 degrees of motherfucking Aries. So the thing is that not only are we having the conjunction of Chiron and North Node at 17, but the moon also is at 17 degrees, and that is the 12th of March. And I just think that that is unbelievably fascinating, just mind-blowing that it's going to even be amplified and accelerated. So that is definitely a day to watch. Again, I'm doing all time zones here in Australia. So yeah, we can see, you know, it's just, yeah, you know, with the mean node.
Actually, she jumps to 17 degrees. Juno is, of course, retrograde. You know, the asteroids kind of jump between the two much more frequently than the natal planets. Wow. Yeah, this is, and look at this like Aries party that we have building up by that stage, right? Because on the dates that I, you know, this is the 12th of March, of course, I brought up the 19th of February. So we can see, you know, everything was sort of here building in Aquarius, right? And a bit of Pisces too, but it's sort of really all just moved into this Pisces and Aries space. Like it's actually quite wild to see. So it's definitely a period of time to watch for, this kind of 2-week period. But I also wanted to say too, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but it's always important as astrologers to understand whether aspects are applying or separating, because that's going to show you how we are sort of feeling into and feeding that energy, right? So really from the beginning of 2024, within like a week or two into the new year, already this Chiron and North Node energy is going to be building, okay? So a lot of what Tiani and I have spoken of today too, don't get too hung up on like waking up on the 19th of Feb or the 5th of March and thinking that everything's going to happen on that day, because the applying energy in astrology is always where that kind of feels like, to me, like a cosmic soup, right? Like that's where everything is kind of coming together, and we're having to be conscious of like putting too much of this, or there's not enough of this, or how is this kind of showing up, because that's where the tension is building, because conjunctions do not automatically equal ease, right? You always have to take into account what sign it's in, what the planets are. And, you know, with Chiron and North Node in Aries, it's fire, it's cardinal. There is kind of going to be like this sense of like, you know, playing with fire, or, you know, being conscious of like just putting your hand on a hot stove, right? Like there may be a shock or a sudden sort of thing that happens in that applying energy that kind of brings you to reality, or brings you into that conscious awareness, or, you know, as Tiani said, that opportunity for wholeness. So it's also just an important thing, can't speak English, to consider with conjunctions.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the conjunction comes and you're like, I've done all this work the last 2 weeks, you know, like it's just like, the last 2 weeks has been what's huge, and that's okay. You know, it's nice to know the date. Sometimes it's just a nice thing. I think when you're astrologers, we get sometimes just like a little bit clinical, and we're like, it happens by the degree and the exact quantum minute at this time. So we just sort of get a little bit like that. But yeah, just, you know, just really, really briefly before we go, because I've just talked, and, you know, if there's one of these episodes that you listen to, that somewhat even correlates to this. It's the Chinese astrology one with Renee. You will watch me frothing and going crazy and excited as fuck with that conversation. It is epic, and epic in a very confronting way. And because we're talking about some big things, but what I then, after having that conversation, I'm just recording, as I've shared, I'm recording all of these in the eclipse season of 2023. But and this is October, and we know what's going on in the world in October of 2023. And so when I Googled and really looked at 2008, the last time Chiron and the North Node come together, I have just written here, Israel and Hamas. That was happening. Yep. Hostages freed in Colombia, lots of war, Iran testing fire missiles, US troops killed and growing violence with the Taliban in Afghanistan, 2 bombs in Istanbul, terror attacks in Mumbai, financial crisis. In 2008, Pluto ingressed into Capricorn. We had the financial crisis. In 2024, Pluto ingresses into Aquarius. That is monumental that both of those conjunctions happened and Pluto shifted signs. Like, this is wild. This isn't always going to happen like this, because Pluto spends a lot longer in Aquarius. And when you listen to the dragon stuff, there is some correlations to this. And again, there's nothing to fear. Astrology cycles, for me, knowing truth and understanding what could or couldn't happen, to me is empowering. I think Oprah used to say, when you know better, you do better. And it's good to know things, like that's empowering. And so I just found that really wild that Pluto ingressed both years, that Chiron was conjunct the North Node, which is rare. And literally I wrote, literally it says Israel and Hamas. And I'm like, here we are. And when you listen to the Chinese astrologer, she does talk about October of 2023, the month of the dog, in full reflection of the dragon year, which is confronting because there is war and we are in it. So the fact that this happened as well, it just, oh my God, why is astrology so fucking literal sometimes? It blows my fucking mind.
Yeah, it's wild, and I mean, I was looking into a lot of stuff too, and whenever there is major kind of peaks in this genocide of the Palestinian people and the issues with the Israeli government, whenever we come into this sort of cycle, often the nodes have been in Aries and Libra. Now, not every single time, because stuff has been happening consistently for 75 years.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But a lot of these sort of high, emotionally charged periods and so forth, like we're experiencing at the time, that right now the North Node is exactly conjunct Eris, by the way.
Exactly.
Often I keep seeing this Aries Libra axis coming up. So yeah, it's big times, and I look forward to seeing that video in particular, because that just right up my alley.
Yes.
Things that I to explore and dive into, and even
I just couldn't get over it. That's all. I was just like, you can't write this stuff. You can't even make it up in a fantasy land. Fuck doing drugs that escape you from reality. This is reality, and it is so highly synced and divinely orchestrated. And I'm not saying what's going on is divine. I'm saying that what's going on is layered, and it's coming in cycles. And we are in a great purge at the moment, and this is a very traumatic time for humanity. Absolutely, that is without a doubt. There have been many tears in my household, because I just don't turn away from the images. I just won't. I will never turn away. I'm white privileged woman, and I will still never ever turn away. But to listen to Renee talk about the dragon, especially because I give a very different depiction in my 2024 kit about the dragon energy, and it is very different. And then she gives this very raw truth, deeply rooted when it comes to the elements and the wood and earth element, and because I'm not a Chinese astrologer, so she knows the ins and outs. And then I did all of this research before our conversation. I'm just like, I can't. She's already talked about this month, and I've written Israel and Hamas. That's what's happening this month. She's already said that it's going to be a reflection. What the hell? What the actual hell? How does this sync up so fucking amazingly? It's just mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
It is. It's like my tangent last year on the Pluto in Aquarius cycles, and time traveling with that, and certain things that we're seeing repeated in history already as well from 250 years ago. yeah, it's like it's always in the astrology, right? Not that the
Always.
astrology makes it happen, but the
No, no.
signs and the sequences and the symbols and the kind of
Yeah.
like piecing it together, because we do repeat cycles as human beings,
Mm.
right? But hopefully the intention is by having that awareness, we can cycle through things hopefully quicker with less less casualties along the way. But of
Seems
course,
like it's more at this point.
yeah, right. But the
Mm.
nature of humanity, unfortunately, isn't always that way. So again, astrology just becomes a resource to be able to move through these times more consciously.
Mm.
And that's why I'm so grateful for the gift that astrology has given me all these years.
I know, it's just the best.
It is.
Oh,
Love
that was so awesome. Thank you so much, Katie, for taking time out today
it.
to join us and
Thank
to
you.
share all of the juice, all the usual casual, easy talk that we do when it comes to astrology.
It's always casual with us, and
I
it's not
know.
never the deep stuff, right? Never the hard
Never.
stuff.
No, we never talk about that. Never talk about that. No, it's been so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that information. And I just, yeah, I hope everyone can plug into this incredible transit. This is an incredible aspect that's happening, and take heed over those couple of months as it's exact and building, and
Yeah.
enjoy the ride.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, love.
Thank you so much, darling. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.